Hello, and welcome to Eastman's Yankee Library. My name is Luke David Eastman, and today I will be reading from Gathered Sketches from the Early History of New Hampshire and Vermont, containing vivid and interesting accounts of a great variety of the adventures of our forefathers and of other incidents of olden time, original and selected, edited by Francis Chase, Master of Arts, Claremont, New Hampshire, Tracy, Kenny and Company, 1856. And today, we are going to be reading Chapter 1, The Red Man's Stratagem. The Red Man's Stratagem, an incident in the early history of Cocheco, 1666. The early settlers of Cocheco were exposed at all times to the relentless hostility of the Indians. No precautions could circumvent their stratagems. They came at all times and in all seasons, with the tomahawk in one hand and the torch in the other, to massacre and destroy. The traveler was cut down on his journey. The husbandman was butchered in his field. The women and children were assaulted at the fireside and consigned to an ignominious death or a captivity worse than death. In the summer of 1666, a band of savages made a descent upon the infant settlement. Their approach having, on this occasion, been observed, time was afforded for such of the inhabitants as could not do good service at bush fighting to retreat to the blockhouses or garrisons. The women and children were hurriedly gathered within the palisades of their defenses, while the rifle of the husband and father for a moment checked the advances of the enemy. There were at this time some half a dozen of these blockhouses at Cocheco, all of which, with one exception, were successfully defended against this assault of the savages. The manner in which this one was captured shows at once the wily character of the enemy against which our fathers had to guard their possessions and their lives, and the perseverance with which that enemy labored to effect their machinations. The Indians, having been repulsed in their first onset upon the settlement, retired, carrying with them the bodies of several of their warriors, who had been shot down in the fight. 2 or 3 of the white men had also been killed. Their bodies were also dragged off, and, having been scalped and otherwise horribly mutilated, were left as a prey to the beasts of the field, while the remains of the Indian braves who had fallen were interred with all the forms and ceremonies of their race. The inhabitants of Cocheco were congratulating themselves upon their successful escape from the enemy. Some of their little band, it was true, had fallen, some too whom they could but illy spare. Their voices hereafter would be missed in the council, and their arms in the fight, but such things were of common occurrence, and the cares of a precarious existence left little time for mourning to the living. The Indians, though repulsed, had not abandoned their designs upon Cocheco. They retired only to devise new and, as they hoped, more successful stratagems for surprising the white man. For several days the watchfulness of the inhabitants circumvented all their machinations, during which they did not deem it prudent to show their copper-colored visages within the range or reach of a rifle shot from the blockhouses. On the 4th day after the first attack, they discovered that one of the blockhouses, which was built on the margin of the river, could be entered on the water side, provided any means could be devised to reach it unobserved. To proceed to it openly in their canoes and make the attempt, either by day or night, was out of the question, as the inhabitants kept a strict lookout and would have bored a bullet hole through the head of the first Indian that came within their reach. In this blockhouse were 4 men with their families, in all about 20. The Indians, having discovered an opening to the garrison, were not long in devising a way to enter it. About half a mile above the settlement was a mowing field, the grass of which had been cut and made into cocks by some of the Cochico men, the day before the descent of the Indians upon them. It was ready for the barn, and as soon as the Indians should retire, it was the intention of the owners to cart it in. Early in the morning of the fourth day, however, they discovered that the enemy, having exhausted every other means of annoying them, were about to commence an assault with and under cover of the hay. Having procured a cart belonging to the settlement, which they had found within their reach, they placed a large quantity of the hay upon it, and having dragged it within a short distance of the garrison, set it on fire, and, under cover of the burning mass, attempted to back it up to, and burn with it, the garrison. Previous to this, however, they had, as it seemed in mere wantonness, set some 15 or 20 cocks of the hay adrift in the river, which were floating slowly down towards the garrison. The besieged had observed this movement, but, suspecting nothing, directed their attention exclusively to the danger which was pressing upon them on the other side of the garrison. The cart, with its contents in a mass of flames, was coming down upon them. The men of the garrison stationed themselves at the loopholes, with their guns, to pick off as many of the enemy as they approached as they could reach, while the women and children brought up water from the river, which they obtained through the door which the Indians had previously discovered, to extinguish the flames. The burning hay had reached the garrison, and was sending its lurid flames far above the walls. Yet, as the house was built of unhewn logs, massive and strong, the fire made but little impression upon it. More than one Indian who had assisted in pushing down the cart had paid for his temerity with his life. The muskets of the besieged kept them at bay or cut them down as they exposed themselves, and the fire from the hay would have been extinguished and the garrison successfully defended had it not been carried in another quarter. While the inmates of the garrison were thus defending themselves from the attack on the land side, the hay in the river had floated down opposite the garrison, having gradually drawn towards the shore as it approached. And as the besieged, having driven the Indians from the cover of the burning hay, were employed in extinguishing it, a dozen savages sprang upon them, as it were, from the bosom of the river, entering the garrison from the water side. Each haycock had concealed the head of an Indian as he swam down the river beneath it. The inmates of the garrison who escaped the tomahawk, with the exception of some half a dozen who succeeded in reaching one of the neighboring houses, were carried off as captives into Canada. Some of the more feeble died on the journey and were left by the wayside. Others lived to return, after years of hardship and suffering, to their friends. Thank you for joining us today on this edition of Eastman's Yankee Library. My name is Luke David Eastman. See you next time.